All right, and thank you, good people, for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast with Bob Omotowa. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Now, folks, a few of you are asking questions throughout this show, and we're going to get you those answers. But before we do, folks, if you are listening to the Real Leaders Podcast for the first time, we had a link fly in there on the bio, as this episode will be edited, produced, and published to all of our platforms. So you want to keep this show going, click that link in that subscribe button, or just simply share this episode to let others hear Bob's story. Okay, first question, Bob's, comes in, and this one, I'm gonna pronounce the name wrong. I'm gonna say NMA, nah. And she asks, "Hi, Bob's. How easy or tough was it for you during those first 2 years of working to make changes in the storeroom, which you found disorganized? What challenges, if any, did you face from colleagues, subordinates, and or bosses, knowing that changing the status quo is not always smooth?" We'll start with that, and then she has another one.
All right, Uma, I think there were different challenges, I would say. I think with my bosses, it was quite a kind of straightforward conversation. I presented to them the situation to say, look, this is a very disorganized place. Materials were being, the stock records were just not accurate. Audit findings were coming up every time about materials haven't been stolen or not been found, and my bosses really didn't have much problem with the vision that I articulated, that we wanted to rearrange the place, we wanted to build wall around the warehouses, we wanted to acquire things. So I think as a directionally, they were quite supportive of it. They had no problems with it. I think the challenge with my bosses, of course, came when the rubber hit the tire. When I come for budget, I needed money to, of course, do those improvements. And of course, when I then needed to, do things differently to move with speed, those were when it then became challenging. Of course, sometimes they couldn't provide the budget. They say, look, you have to wait a year. And sometimes I say, look, we have to find a way around it. But I think directionally, they were very supportive. So I think bosses would generally be very supportive when you talk about improvements. They always want to see that. And they may be challenged in terms of resources and all of that, but then you can work through. I think for my subordinates, I think the first was disbelief. They just didn't believe that, was this possible? This place has been run down for all these years. Why would it change? Just because you say it will change, it doesn't mean it will change. So I think one was a disbelief. Two, they were already disoriented anyway. They just were not motivated. They just thought, are we going to do all this? Will it work and all of that? So there was a lot of effort to motivate them, to really show them it was possible. And of course, as they saw the improvements, as they saw things happening, then they became motivated. And I think by the time we got probably 30-40% through the process, I think they were really hugely motivated. They wanted to do this, and at that point in time, I think I started to back off. They were the ones leading the change and leading the charge at that time, because they could see that it was going forward, and they could see the success. I think with my colleagues, it was not. There were no issues. We worked together, really. We had a number of colleagues that we were working in the team at that time. Some of them we had to, get things like what we call make-run deliveries and all of that. We had all just, by the way, we had all joined the company about the same time. We were still relatively new, so there was really no challenge, I would say, with my colleagues. Very supportive, worked together. We were really, supporting each other. And there was really no issues, I would say. And, I remain, even till today, I still remain very close to all those colleagues that we work together with. We still chat on WhatsApp, very friendly group. I'm really proud of each and every one of them who we worked together at that time. So I would say, Ma, that you'll find differences between the various groups, and also they change over time. And those who may have been, naysayers at some point become cheerleaders at some point, because maybe they were demotivated initially. With time, they became convinced, and they really put in their best, and really huge appreciation to all of them. Without them, there will have been no success in that story. But for all those colleagues, subordinates, and bosses who have made the change happen.
Well, I just want to say thank you for the question, Uma, and detailed answer for a detailed question. The next one comes from Hakeem Bobs, and he asks, Bobs, you had a lot of courage in taking decisions. Were you ever scared of the consequences or taking wrong decisions?
I think, thanks, Hakeem. I think the way I define courage as well, it's courage is not the absence of fear. But courage is the belief that something more important is at play. So it's not that, I wasn't afraid or I wasn't scared of the consequences. No, it wasn't that I wasn't. Of course, some of the consequences could be not just career, some of the consequences could even be fatal. Uh, you know, but it wasn't that I wasn't fearful. It was just that I believed that what we needed to achieve was more important than that my fear. And so, because I thought what we wanted to achieve was more important, then it gave me the courage to say, look, the end product is more important than the fear I'm having. And I think that's what always helps me in those periods. If I look at what do we want to achieve, if I think that it is way beyond my fear, then I'm happy to move forward. If I feel that it's not what my fear, then I can say, okay, it's not worth it. But even in the cases where I thought this could be fatal, I still found that the output was more important than even that, and that gave me the courage. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, when Kevin asked me, I grew up with a Christian background as well, so there's also that element for me that I always believe in that God is the one who protects, and he is the one who gives life. If he says nothing will happen to me, then nothing will happen to me. So I always take confidence in that as well.
Believing in a higher purpose, seeing more, and having a long-term perspective. I think you touched on it a few times today as well, and a few of your examples seems to be very consistent with what you're saying. Another question comes in, and by the way, people, thank you for continuing to ask questions. This is the most engaged we've had our audience members in a long time. Keep those questions coming. This one comes in from Tega, and he asks, really excited to hear that C-suite leaders generally try to go forward with ideas that drive value when well articulated. Are there times when you found personal and divergent interests interfering with this? And how do you move forward?
It's a great question, Tega. I think it's one of the difficult things, of course, for individuals and leaders, of course, because sometimes you have your own perspective, and if you're not careful, you have your own paradigms and experiences as well. And if I think of this world and I think of the changes we've seen, if I think of Kodak and iPhone and how iPhone as a camera, Kodak didn't believe it would ever get the traction it's gotten. I think that's a challenge for leaders, and I think there's no way to say that will not happen, because sometimes your experiences may cloud your judgment. But I think it's back to what I said earlier. As a leader, you really have to learn to listen and to probe and to inquire deeply, and have a more open mind. I would say that with experiences as well, as a leader, you should really be more open-minded, because remember what I said earlier on. For me, when I look to bring talents into my team, I'm actually looking to bring some people who are much more intelligent than myself into the team. And if I believe that I'm bringing more intelligent people into my team, then I need to have that attitude where I have to listen. And even when some of their thoughts are not exactly to what my experiences say, I need to think, there must be something in what they're saying. And what I do as a leader many times is, not to take a decision on the moment, especially when things are not urgent. to have the opportunity to dig deeper, to find out more, and to have some engagements beyond the immediate. But it's a dilemma that I think you will always have to be dealing with as a leader, and you always have to be questioning yourself that you're not allowing your biases to preclude very interesting divergent opportunities and ideas.
And also just to add on what you said about emotional intelligence too. I think that's a big part of kind of what you're saying. Another one comes in from Dr. Bola, and they ask, "Hi Babs, great to have worked and helped to progress international private enterprises. Even with little or no interest in politics, how will you stand up to be counted in changing your country for the better society they deserve?"
Excellent, Bola. And it's by the way, Kevin Bola and I also worked at Shell, so I know him very well as well. Um, it's a great question, and one that I've always been confronted with many times. How do you help in your society? And as Bola rightly said, I'm not a politician. I don't pretend to be one. I just don't have the skills to be a politician in Nigeria. So that I think is the reality. But I think but what I've always said to myself is you might not be able to. One might not be able to change to solve world hunger. One might not be able to boil an ocean, but in whatever little area you are, try to be the change that you are looking for. Try to inspire people. Your role as a leader may not be to be the one making the change. You may actually have more impact inspiring society. If I think of America, if I think of the civil rights group, someone like Martin Luther King was never, the one that was. He was never in a position. He was never a governor or a minister. He was just an activist. But by his examples, by his role modeling, by the word that he shared, he was able to influence and help change. And I think that's the way I try to look at change. That uh, one does not necessarily have to be in government. One does not necessarily have to be in position to be able to influence society in whatever little area you were, be that change. And I think, in the roles I've been as CEO of Nigeria LNG, even in Shell that I've been vice president, I have always tried to be the change that I hope that, we all want to see in Nigeria. By the examples I try to create in those roles, either through my integrity, through the courage I drive through helping to change businesses and developing local contents. Through some of those examples, I hope to, at the very least, be able to, be the example of what one is looking for. So I think, Bala, that's the way I look at it. I'm still optimistic that I will still have, still have more years in the future. I will still have more opportunities. There will still be more things that I will be able to do. But at the very least, I think, in whatever little area we are, let's be the change that we want to see. And we may not boil the ocean, we may not solve world hunger, but if we can change a little area, we'll already make a big difference.
Powerful quote, be the change you want to see in the world. Next one comes in from Antonuke. They ask, what can be done to restore integrity and instill discipline back to organization where both are lacking?
A great question, Tinoke. I think what I think is always two things. I think there's for when you talk about integrity, I think there's what I described earlier. There's the compliance part of it, and then there's the commitment part of it. And that's the way I will always think about integrity. I think on the compliance part of it, you have to define the rules of engagements. What are the rules? What are your processes? What are your procedures? You have to define those very clearly, and you have to instill them in the organization. This is the rule of how we run procurement. This is the rule of how we resource positions. Very clear rules. So I think with those clear rules, you really start from that point. And once you have the rules, then you must make sure you have a mechanism to measure compliance. How do you ensure that people are indeed following those rules? How do you ensure that they are following. Some of it is true audits, but some of it is also true, self assurance in the processes to make sure they're happening. So I would say that is one aspect of it. The other aspect I think is commitment. I think, this is the one that I always think it's very important. You need to find ways to create commitment in the organization. And one of the examples I spoke about in my book was, you need to think of integrity from a leadership perspective. Leaders have to be leaders of integrity, because if the leaders are not leaders of integrity, the rest of the organization will see through it. You can't hide it. If you are not someone with integrity, people will soon see through you. So if you are not putting leaders with integrity in senior positions, then you're already jeopardizing whatever rules you're putting in place. You're already jeopardizing everything, because people will say, we don't trust these leaders. They're doing fishy stuff. So why won't we do? And so you must find ways and mechanisms of putting in the right leaders in positions, because that in itself will drive those compliance in the right manner, that commitment as well, finding ways to drive it. So those will be the two ways I would say: compliance and commitment. And compliance is rules, procedures, audits, and all of that. And commitment is about role modeling and being able to drive commitment of the organization to the ethical and integrity standards.
I like that. Yeah, establishing a clear criteria to begin with, and then coming up with a solution and looking back at that criteria, I think is something that it's kind of funny. I'm literally learning it in this book called the Naming Book. In order to find the right name, you got to establish the criteria first. It's the same thing for everything. I missed Uma's question, her second question, and she politely reminded me. She said, I have a second question, Kevin. She says, having gone this far from your personal experiences, what is the difference between the storeroom and the boardroom? And what's your advice to the younger ones?
Suma. I think there are, of course, differences in the storeroom and boardroom, but I think, one of the main differences I would say is that in the storeroom, of course, there's a lot more. It's back to what I said earlier. As I said, at the lower level, IQ is more important. So at that storeroom level, it's really about, how much intelligence you have, how much you're able to think of what needs to be done, and how much you're able to, deliver those results. At that time, it was also more, I would say, more about just your small area of influence. So I was only talking of storeroom. So that's only one area. I think by the time you start getting to boardroom, of course, it's now beyond just your IQ. It's now down to your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence, and your adversarial intelligence. All of that are played regularly in the boardroom. And you're not now just looking at, as I said earlier, you're not just looking at shareholder value alone. You're looking at stakeholder value as well in that sort of area. And you will have tension. It's back to the question Kevin asked earlier. There will be tensions in that sort of situation. How do you ensure that you're not spending on stakeholder value and destroying shareholder value? The dilemmas that you are managing in the boardroom are much more than the dilemmas you manage in a storeroom. Your storeroom is nearly clear-cut things you need to do. You need to stop people stealing. You need to arrange things properly. You need to ensure your customers are happy. So very, very clear-cut. Sometimes in the boardroom, answers are not so clear. It's not one answer that really is clear for everyone to see. And it's indeed how you manage those interplays starts to become much more important. So I would say, it's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more emotional. It's much more social, much more adversarial. All of that coming to manage the dilemmas. Advice for younger ones, I would always say, one, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. That's the first thing. Don't let people define you. One of the stories I wrote in my book was once I had a boss who for some reason I didn't do something he wanted me to do because I thought it was not ethical, and he said I was not going to progress in the company. He was going to mark me down. He was going to make sure my potential was brought down. And he did that. That year, my performance went down. My potentials were put down. But I didn't worry. I continued my work because I knew why. I thought I deserved better, but he chose to punish me for not doing what I thought was unethical. But 2 years on, I moved on to another job. I moved on to another job to another supervisor. My performance went back up, my potential went back up, and the rest is history, as they say.
Right.
So I would say, one, don't let anyone put you down. If you have a tough time with a boss, that's okay. As long as you've been working on the right things and you're doing the right things, continue. Your boss will change. You will have other opportunities to do better. So, don't let yourself be put down. The second thing I would say is you have to continuously develop yourself. You have to continuously develop yourself. Don't rest on your oars. Whatever you achieve today is as good as today. By tomorrow, you need to be achieving something different. What you know today is as good as for today. Tomorrow, you need to know something different. And that continuous learning, that curiosity, very, very important, because it allows you to bring new perspective. It allows you to bring improvement, which is key for your role. And then finally, I would say learn to work with others. You just need to learn to work with others. It's not just about yourself. I think about others, and the more you are able to influence, even without authority, the more you're able to build relationships, the more you're able to build networks, the more you are likely able to impact more. And as I say to people, building relationship is not about what you will gain. Building relationship is about what you will sow into other people's life. How do you make their lives easier? So if you are working in finance, how do you make the life of your colleague or your friend in production better? By doing that, you sow a lot into them that at some point, when you may need something, you have sowed a lot into their bank that you can harvest quite a lot. So those would be a few things I will advise them. But they help people, or they help me in my career.
Powerful advice. One of those takeaways I got was don't compromise your beliefs. Another one was this. We actually had, I don't know if you knew this now, but we had Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence, on this show not too long ago. And what he was saying is very similar to what you were saying about IQ and EQ. IQ, you use it when you're young and you know the right answer. It's a smart answer. Problem is, how do you get people to buy into that answer? And so what he's saying is this, his argument is, well, basically by the time of 25 or late 20s, your brain has fully developed. Your IQ cannot really change. It's really it's going to stay around those numbers. However, your emotional intelligence can always improve, especially as you grow and become more self-aware and be able to understand different emotions, different people, how they interact, how to coordinate people to achieve a common goal. I thought that was a really interesting point, and you've definitely touched on that just in different language. Two last questions for you, Bobs, then we'll let you go. I think they're important questions, though. The first one is this. What were your regrets in the course of your leadership journey and or endeavors?
What were your regrets in the course of... That's a great question. I think I think regret, if probably a strong word, but if there's one area of my journey that I think I wish I could have done differently, it would have been work-life balance. I think I sacrificed the life part, which probably was one of the reasons why I also retired a bit early, because I had to leave my family in a different location to where I was working, because I wanted my family to have stability, especially the children. I didn't want them to be changing schools every, two or three years, and that would mean they will have different friends, they will just not be stable. And I didn't think that was good. So I kept my family in one place. And then moved around. I moved around like 5 or 6 roles in that period, which would have meant too much change for my children, I thought. But that then meant that I didn't see many of my children's growing up activities. I wasn't able to be part of their inter-house sport or games or music lesson or parents-teachers meeting as much as I would have wanted to be. And of course, as I say, the relationship you build with children is what will enable you have a relationship with them when they leave the home. If you don't have a good relationship with your children while they're young, when they become adults, then they won't relate well with you. So which was part of the reason why I decided to retire a bit very early so that I could also spend more time as well with my children as well. So if there's anything I would say, yeah, probably work-life balance was not the best, and I wish I had done more of that with my children.
That's real. I appreciate you sharing that, Babs. I know it's sometimes difficult. Last question comes in here from Josiah, and they ask, how would you describe your leadership style, and what are some of the books that have shaped you?
Thanks, Josiah. When I talk about leadership style, Josiah, I always talk about it from what I call a situational leadership. I find that trying to describe a leadership in a box is not helpful. So I describe myself as a situational leader. What does that mean, Josiah? I always say that if you are a leader in an organization that is in a crisis, if you are trying to use the same style as a leader who is working in a very stable organization, you might not achieve the results you need to achieve. And so I nearly put leadership for me in 4 boxes. What is the stability of the business you are in, or maturity of the business you're in, and what is the performance of the business you are in? So if you're in a startup business, how you will lead there will be different from if you are in a mature business that is talking about growth. If you are in a company that is in crisis, about to go bankrupt, you cannot manage it the same way as you manage a company that is, very profitable and doing very well. So I always talk about situational leadership. What is the context in which you are leading? What is the maturity of the business that you are leading, and what's the profitability of the business you are leading? And all the resources you have, the people that you are leading. What are the what type of resources you have? Those will shape your leadership style. So I don't like to say this one style because if I'm in a crisis situation, then I need to manage things a lot more sharper. If I'm in a place where we're doing well, I need to bring more creativity and really drive a lot more longer term opportunities and all of that. But if you're in a business that will collapse within a year, if you don't get a grip on it, then you have to manage it slightly different. Books, very many of them. I've always found the 7 Habits of Effective People as one of the good books I've always read. But lots of books along the way. One of the ones I read recently, it's not a leadership book, but really opened my eyes a bit differently, was one by Hans Rosling on factfulness. Because it opened my eyes. I think it was back to the question somebody asked about, how do you make sure you're not blinkered? And in factfulness, it really kind of opens your mind to the truth that sometimes you are conditioned by things you read, things you watch, and you define the world from those prisms. So, Professor Rossley did use some great examples of great questions to ask, simple questions. What percentage of women do you think are educated in the world today? And he will give figures like, is it 20%, is it 50% or 70%? And he did this across, Harvard University professors, journalists, and all of that. And he found that the vast majority of people got the answers of most of these questions wrong, because we have been shaped to think based on what we see on TV, what we read in newspapers, and in majority of the time, it's only one view, not the whole world view.
Bobs, it's been a pleasure having you on this show today, my friend. We did a show and a half today answering all these questions. Appreciate everyone hanging on to listen to Bobs. Let's just give him a quick round of applause real quick for staying on, taking time to answer all of your questions. Means a lot to me, means a lot to the show. And if you want to hear this episode, just make sure you click the link in this chat description up here and subscribe, as this episode will be released this Saturday. And we want to make sure that you all are subscribed to get notified of its release. Now, lastly, the most important thing here, Bobs, is where can people find more information about From Storeroom to Boardroom?
Thanks, Kevin. I think the book is available on Amazon. Any of the Amazon website has the book. If you just type in, either you type in Omotowa or you type in Storeroom to Boardroom, you will find it. It's also available in Waterstone and the online as well. This is the international edition. It's available on Amazon and Waterstone. There will be a Nigerian edition coming up, I think, in Q2, Q3, and that will be available in local bookstores in Nigeria as well. So thanks for that, Kevin.
Of course. Go get that book, folks. Get your hands on that book and read all about Bob's story. Bob, inspiring story. I'm so happy you were able to get you on this show today. It was a pleasure speaking with you. For Bob's Omotowa, I'm Kevin Edwards. Actually, need to go out there and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much, Kevin.